Dominique et Nique s'en allaient tout simplement. Routier, pauvre et gens.
Pull up a chair, because we're diving into 12 of the most horrible number one hits of the 1960s. Yes, even in this golden age of music, not every chart topper was a gem.
Just me and her, yes, we're gonna go back up to that sugar shack.
In fact, some songs that made it all the way to the top, to number one, left us scratching our heads and wondering, how did this happen? So sit back, relax. Here are 12 of those classics that are questionable at best.
And as she walked up to the blackboard, I can still recall the words she had to say.
Ringo by Lorne Greene, 1964. When you think of 1964, you probably imagine Beatlemania sweeping the globe, Motown dominating the charts, and a cultural shift that was kinda redefining music. And then out of nowhere comes Ringo by Lorne Greene, a spoken word Western ballad that somehow galloped all the way to number one. Hey, I love Lorne Greene, best known as that tough, reliable patriarch Ben Cartwright on Bonanza, but he decided to trade in his cowboy hat for a microphone with his oddball track.
There's nothing for me in this town. There's no future here.
So, what will you do?
It tells the tale of a mysterious outlaw named, yes, Ringo, complete with dramatic narration, sweeping orchestration, and, once in a blue moon, a chorus sung in the background. Nope, not exactly a toe tapper, but it's certainly memorable. The song itself is pure Old West melodrama. Greene doesn't sing so much as he recites the story, painting a vivid picture of Ringo's misunderstood heroism. The chorus chimes in every now and again with repetitive cries of Ringo, as if to make sure you don't forget the name.
And a tear for Ringo.
Ringo!
The song was written by Don Robertson and Hal Blair, seasoned songwriters who had penned hits for legends like Elvis Presley. But while the King had hip-shaking rhythms and charisma, Ringo more relied on its cinematic feel. It was almost like someone plucked a scene out of a cowboy film, stuck it on a record, and just hoped for the best. So why is it on our list of the worst number one songs of the 1960s? Well, for one thing, it's just more than a bit bizarre that this Western-themed chit-chat topped the charts in the same era as the Beatles, the Supremes, and the Beach Boys. Personally, I think the sound was a bit outdated, even for 1964, leaning into a style that was more suited to a 50s radio drama than the evolving music scene of the 1960s.
Of the deadly 44 of Ringo.
Ringo!
And let's not forget how cheesy it is. Greene's big dramatic delivery paired with those equally dramatic pauses, it makes it feel more like a parody than a serious tune.
Began to shout and cheer. Nowhere was there shed a tear.
But the folks just ate it up. Well, because Greene's Bonanza fame, but for many it was just too campy and kitschy to take seriously. It's one of those songs that leaves you wondering how in the world it climbed to number one on the charts, or if anyone was taking the charts seriously when it did. Dominique by the Singing Nun, 1963. Do you remember Dominique by the Singing Nun? Because I think it's pretty hard to forget, and pretty hard to even make sense of it in the first place. We're talking 1963, when the charts were full of surf rock, girl group harmonies, and the dapper, drug-fueled British leading the invasion. When this sweet little tune came out of nowhere.
Dominique, Nique s'en allait tout simplement. Routier.
The Singing Nun's real name was Sister Luke Gabrielle. Before that she was Jean Deckers, but once a nun, now Luke Gabrielle. A Belgian nun with a guitar, and her song about Saint Dominique somehow climbed all the way to number one on the Billboard Hot 100. Yeah, a simple song at the top. Just her voice and that guitar, but something about it really caught people's attention. Maybe it was its innocence, or maybe we were just looking for something different in those days, already getting in that spirit of going against the grain. But either way, it is still easily one of the most unusual hits of the decade, or any decade, especially considering the bigger music scene at that time. The story behind Dominique is as quirky as the song itself. Jean Deckers wrote it as a tribute to Saint Dominique, who founded her Dominican order.
Dominique et Nique s'en allaient tout simplement.
It was never meant to be a pop sensation, just a humble little tune meant for her community. But when she recorded it with Philips Records, it took off like wildfire, first in Europe and then across the pond here in the US. Suddenly, people who didn't understand a word of French were humming along to a song about a 13th century saint. It won a Grammy and inspired a Hollywood movie starring Debbie Reynolds. Just imagine that. 1 minute you're living in a convent, and the next you're an international music sensation.
And when I sing the chorus, all the world will sing along. Dominique.
But here's the thing. As charming as it was at first, Dominique didn't exactly stand the test of time, I think. It's kind of that song you hear once and think, oh, that's cute, but by the third listen, you're ready to skip it. The melody was so repetitive, and unless you spoke French, the lyrics were just a mystery. But even if you did understand the words, the song wasn't exactly gripping. It was basically a biography of Saint Dominique. And let's be real, in a year when the Beach Boys were singing about hot rods, and Dylan was starting to ask big questions, a song about a medieval saint, it just felt really out of place. It was just too innocent, like it belonged on a children's record rather than topping the pop charts. Looking back, Dominique feels like one of those odd little blips in music history. It was not bad, I'm not saying that, in the way that some other songs on this list are. It was really sweet, it had a lot of heart, but it just didn't fit in the moment. It's just hard to believe it was competing with the likes of the Ronettes and Roy Orbison. You've just gotta wonder if people were just so charmed by the idea of a singing nun that they overlooked the song itself. And that's why it's here on this list. It's not that it's terrible, it's just that it doesn't make a lick of sense as a #1 hit. It is one of those only in the 60s moments, for better or for worse. Winchester Cathedral by the New Vaudeville Band, 1966. Oh boy, Winchester Cathedral, do you remember this one? From 1966, right in the middle of one of the most exciting times in music history, I think, when the Beatles were breaking boundaries and Motown was unstoppable. You know, folk rock was finding its voice. And yet, somehow this odd little tune with a megaphone vocal and a bouncy old-timey sound, it managed to climb to #1. Go figure, I guess.
Winchester Cathedral, you're bringing me down.
The New Vaudeville Band was behind it, a group that wasn't even a real band when the song was recorded. Is anything about this song straightforward? No. The whole thing just felt like a joke that went way too far, or I guess, depending on how you look at it, a joke that landed perfectly. Okay, to be fair to the track, the song itself is pure novelty. It's a throwback to the 1920s music hall style, complete with honky-tonk piano and a singer delivering the lyrics like he's shouting through an old gramophone horn.
Could have done something, but you didn't try.
The story goes that the song's writer, Jeff Stevens, created it as a kind of tribute, or maybe a parody of that old-timey sound. And the latter of which would make it kinda hilarious, cause when it hit the airwaves, people couldn't get enough of it. You know, kind of like Disco Duck.
Your face like a flower in bloom, like green berry.
And here's a fun twist. That megaphone-style vocal wasn't even performed by a regular band member. It was studio singer John Carter who gave the track its distinct voice. But he wasn't even a part of the touring group that formed after the song became a hit. But let's be honest, this song earned its spot on our particular list because, well, it's just plain goofy. It's hard to believe it came out in the same year as classics like Good Vibrations and How Red Doors Lived in Fear of Paint It Black. Because Winchester Cathedral felt completely out of step with the times. The 60s were all about breaking rules and pushing boundaries, and here comes this jaunty little ditty that sounded like it belonged in your grandparents' 78 RPM collection. Hey, I'll admit it is catchy for sure, but in that, get stuck in your head and drives you crazy kind of way. But a lot of people loved it. A lot of people's dads whistled it all the time. But for others, it was like a novelty Christmas ornament. Fun for a moment, but not something you want around all year.
Winchester Cathedral,
Looking back, Winchester Cathedral, you've got to give it credit for standing out, but it's hard to understand how it managed to top the charts in such a groundbreaking era of music. Maybe people were just in the mood for something light and silly, or maybe it was a reaction to how heavy and serious some music was becoming. But either way, it is one of those hits that leaves you scratching your head and laughing at the same time.
Winchester Cathedral, you're breaking me down.
It sounds like you're waiting for the circus to begin. And yes, that's why it's here on this list. Not because it's terrible, but because it is so completely bizarre. Ballad of the Green Berets by Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler, 1966. Now here's a song that really takes you back. If you remember 1966, you know it was a time of massive cultural shifts. The Vietnam War was escalating, protests were starting to take hold, and music was becoming one of the loudest voices for change. And yet, in the middle of all of this, here comes this patriotic anthem that's as straightforward as it gets.
Fearless men who jump and die.
Written and sung by an actual Green Beret, Barry Sadler, it wasn't just a song, it was a statement. For some, it was a proud tribute to the bravery of soldiers, but for some others, it felt like a reminder of how divided the country was becoming. The song itself is like a marching anthem. With its drum beat and somber melody, it's all about celebrating the heroism of the Green Berets, the elite U.S. Army Special Forces unit. Sadler wrote it while recovering from a combat injury, and it is clear that the song came from a very personal place.
Trained in combat, hand to hand.
It's essentially a list of accomplishments. Fearless men who jump and die, men who mean just what they say. It is sincere, no doubt about that, but it is also kinda heavy-handed. Yes, I'll say it, it is kinda like a recruitment ad set to music.
Fearless men who jump and die. Men who...
And it wasn't just a flash in the pan, it became a massive hit, sitting at #1 for 5 weeks, and even ending the year as one of the top songs on the Billboard charts. So why does Ballad of the Green Berets land on this list of the worst #1 songs from the 60s? Well, it's not about the message. We at Do You Remember will be the first to agree that honoring the courage of soldiers is the noblest thing you can do.
100 men will test today.
But musically, it felt like it belonged to an earlier time. Again, the late 60s, music was evolving rapidly, reflecting the complexities of the world. And then you have this song, which sounds more like a leftover from a 1940s war film soundtrack. It is old-fashioned, and it felt out of step with the energy and creativity of the decade. It was a throwback in time, when music was all about moving forward. And then there's the cultural context. Again, for some, it was a rallying cry, a song that represented honor and patriotism. But for others, it was a reminder of the growing divide over the Vietnam War. By 1966, anti-war sentiment was bubbling up, especially among younger generations, and then a song like this, no matter how well-intentioned, it did not resonate with everyone.
He'll be a man, they'll test one day.
It wasn't just about the music, it was about what the song represented, and that's why it's on this list. It's not a bad song, but it felt out of sync with the times. It's a great tribute, yes, but a bad #1 hit. I'm sorry, I said it. Let me know how wrong I am in the comments section. Sugar Shack by Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs, 1963. Sugar Shack. If you were around in 1963, you could not escape it. This quirky little tune by Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs was everywhere, topping the Billboard charts for 5 weeks and even becoming the biggest hit of the entire year. Yep, that's right, the biggest.
And everybody calls it the Sugar Shack.
In a year when music legends like the Beatles and the Beach Boys were starting to dominate, this oddball track about a coffee house somehow took the crown. And looking back, face it, even you have to wonder, was it really that good? Or was it a little catchy earworm that people couldn't get out of their heads? The song's premise is simple. It's all about a guy who's head over heels for a girl working at a coffee shop. Or as the song puts it, a sugar shack.
Gonna drink a lot of coffee, spend a little cash, make that girl love me when...
With its bouncy rhythm and that funky little organ riff, it had a charm that made it hard to ignore. And And fun fact, that iconic organ sound came from a 49-buck Hammond chord organ that one of the band members just happened to pick up. And it gave the song its unique, almost playful vibe. So next time you see that little oddity at a local yard sale, maybe think about picking it up. It could give you a #1 hit. Anyway, as far as music goes, the lyrics are sweet, maybe too sweet, and paint a picture of innocent young love. But that same sweetness is also what makes it feel a bit cloying after a while. It's like cotton candy, fun for a bit, but after a while, it's just gross.
Just me and her, yes, we're gonna go back up to that sugar shack.
And that's why Sugar Shack is on this list. For starters, it's just so lightweight. The 60s were a time of big ideas and bold experimentation in music, and this song feels like it's stuck in a soda fountain jukebox. It doesn't have the depth or the creativity of the era's best work. It's catchy, yes, but in that repetitive way that drives you nuts. And I have to say it, that organ riff, while unique, it borders on obnoxious after the 10th or 15th listen.
There's this cute little girlie, she's a working there.
It's the kind of song that's fun in small doses, but does not hold up when you compare it to truly iconic music of the 1960s. And then there's the timing. In 1963, music was on the brink of a major transformation. Against that backdrop, Sugar Shack feels like it's from a different world entirely. You know, one that hadn't quite caught up to where music was headed. It's not that it's a bad song, but it is hard to believe it is the biggest hit of the year.
Sugar Shack. Yeah, honey, to our Sugar Shack.
It's just more of a cute novelty song, more than a timeless classic, and that's why it's on this list. It's fun for what it is, I guess, but in the grand scheme of 1960s music, it just doesn't measure up, and I don't really want to go back to the Sugar Shack. Honey by Bobby Goldsboro, 1968. Honey, I'm home. If you lived through 1968, chances are you've got some strong feelings about this one. Bobby Goldsboro's sentimental ballad about love and loss was a massive hit, spending 5 weeks at #1 and becoming one of the year's biggest songs.
Honey, I miss you.
Boy, it's a tearjerker through and through, telling the story of a man mourning his wife, reflecting on their time together, and recounting the little quirks that made her so special. It is a song that tugs at the heartstrings, but it's also a song that divides people.
I came home unexpectedly and caught her crying needlessly.
Some people find it touching, while others think it's just way too sentimental, it's just way too thick. The song's backstory is as dramatic as its lyrics. It was written by Bobby Russell, a pretty big shot songwriter who also penned hits like Little Green Apples. When Goldsboro got a hold of Honey, he knew it was something special, or at the very least, something emotional.
And I'd love to be with you.
The song paints vivid pictures of small, everyday moments, the wife planting a tree in the yard, breaking things by accident, or laughing at her own silly mistakes. But these sweet details are delivered in such it's a heavy-handed way. It's just lush strings and Goldsboro's almost whisper, tearful delivery. It just feels like he's trying a bit too hard to wring the tears from his audience. But hey, I have to admit it worked beautifully for some, and for others it was too much. So why is Honey on our list of the worst #1 songs of the 1960s? Well, it comes down to that overwhelming sentimentality.
And it was in the early spring when flowers bloom and robins sing.
There's no denying the song is heartfelt, but it's also melodramatic to the point where it feels a little manipulative, is the only word I can think of. Feel this emotion. Cry, baby, cry. The lyrics spell out every single emotion without leaving any room for subtlety, which might explain why it has not aged too well. It's kind of like the musical equivalent of a Hallmark card. It's sweet in its way, but it's also a bit too sweet, a bit too on the nose. And then there's Goldsboro's delivery, which, while sincere, it borders on saccharine.
Came running in, all excited, slipped and almost hurt herself.
For many listeners, it was just hard to get through the song without rolling their eyes just a bit. Also, again, what else was on the airwaves? That's important. We had artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. They're pushing the boundaries. Motown's rockin', the British invasion is here, and now we have Honey. It just felt like a relic from another era. It didn't challenge you or make you think. It just asked you to cry, forced you to cry. And for some it worked, but for others it was just too syrupy to take seriously. And that's why it's on this list. It just feels out of place in such a vibrant, innovative decade. It's a song that wanted you to break your heart, but ended up splitting opinions in two.
Memories of honey, and I wake up nights and call her name.
Mr. Custer by Larry Verne, 1960. Now here's one for the history books, literally and figuratively. Mr. Custer by Larry Verne. You remember this one? Another one of those novelty songs that somehow shot to the top of the charts in 1960, and looking back, it's hard to believe it made it there.
Famous day in history, the men of the 7th Cavalry went riding on.
The song is a comedic take on the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn, sung from the perspective of a reluctant soldier who really does not want to follow General Custer into what would become one of history's most infamous defeats. With its goofy lyrics and cartoonish delivery, Mr. Custer might have gotten a laugh back then, but it's safe to say it really hasn't aged too well. Larry Verne wasn't exactly a household name before or after this hit. In fact, Mr. Custer was certainly a one-hit wonder. The song was not aiming for deep social commentary, and instead it leaned into slapstick humor, complete with sound effects like bugle calls and war cries.
Coward, I've been called, 'cause I don't wanna.
Verne's exaggerated, almost whiny delivery sold the song as a piece of pure novelty, and at the time, that's exactly what people were in the mood for, I guess. It was really silly, it was different, and it gave folks something to chuckle about during a year when the charts were otherwise dominated by polished pop and rockabilly tunes. So why does Mr. Custer land on this list of the worst #1 songs of the 60s? Well, for starters, the humor doesn't hold up. What might have seemed like harmless fun in 1960, it just feels cringy today, especially when you consider the historical context. The song pokes fun at an event that involved real lives and a lot of tragedy, and it does so in a way that kind of feels flippant. And then there's the sheer cheesiness of it all. The lyrics, "Please Mr. Custer, I don't want to go." They're catchy, I guess, but they're so repetitive.
Please, Mr. Custer, I don't want to go.
After about a minute or, 15 seconds of him singing, you've gotten the joke, and the rest of the song just feels like overkill. Cause not everything in 1960 felt so old-fashioned. I mean, you have the movie Psycho, making everyone second guess taking showers, and then Mr. Custer. It just felt like it belonged to another era, an era of novelty records and lighthearted fluff that was quickly falling out of fashion, and so today, it's way out of fashion.
They were sure of victory, the men of the 7th Cavalry, as they rode on.
And that's what this list is. It's a retrospective look at the worst 1960s #1 hits. A novelty hit, that's all, maybe a bit funny at the time, but now I just can't believe it was a #1 hit. MacArthur Park by Richard Harris, 1968. So you all knew MacArthur Park was gonna be on this list, right? Released in 1968 and performed by Richard Harris. Yes, the same Richard Harris who played King Arthur in Camelot. But I think this song is remembered for one thing, that bizarre lyric about someone leaving a cake out in the rain.
But I, like a striped pair of pants.
We're talking a 7-minute epic with sweeping orchestration, cryptic lyrics, and that cake in the rain. A level of drama that borders on operatic. It's one of those songs where people either absolutely love its eccentricity or they just don't get it. And I have to admit, I don't get it. The story behind MacArthur Park is just as odd as the song itself. It was written by Jimmy Webb, a prolific songwriter behind classics like By the Time I Get to Phoenix and Wichita Lineman.
Searching in the sun for another overload.
Webb reportedly wrote the song as a metaphor for a failed relationship, using the imagery of MacArthur Park in LA, where he and his girlfriend used to spend time. The lyrics are a mishmash of poetic symbolism and head-scratchers. And someone please get that cake in from the rain. I guess that's meant to represent something precious being ruined? Yeah. And then there's Richard Harris's performance. It's passionate, it's theatrical, and let's be honest, it's a lot over the top.
I will take my life into my hand.
You can tell he's giving it his all, but whether that works or not, well, that's for the listener to decide. MacArthur Park has to be one of the worst #1 songs of the 60s. Let's just start with the lyrics. They're undeniably unique, but they also border on nonsensical. The cake metaphor has been parodied endlessly. It's now almost like a cultural punchline. And then the length. We're talking over 7 minutes. It feels like a marathon and not exactly what you want from a pop song. And while the orchestration is ambitious, it's also a bit overwhelming at times, with sudden shifts in tempo and tone that leave you wondering what just happened. It's a lot to take in, and for a lot of listeners, it's just too much. But perhaps the biggest issue of how out of place MacArthur Park is hey, it's the late 60s. We're talking groundbreaking music, and against that backdrop, MacArthur Park felt almost alien, like it belonged in a Broadway musical instead of the pop charts. It's dramatic, yes, but a bit too dramatic for the era's increasingly down-to-earth sensibilities.
After all the loves of my life.
It dared to be different and ended up being just plain baffling. It's a relic of a time when artists took big swings, and while you've got to respect that, it doesn't mean every swing was a homer. I'm Henry VIII, I Am, by Herman's Hermits, 1965. Oh, Herman's Hermits, the British invasion band best known for their cheeky charm, and they turned this silly little music hall song into a massive hit. The song originally came from 1910, part of the old British pub song tradition, and the band gave it a rock and roll twist. It's bouncy, repetitive, and undeniably catchy, but maybe too catchy for its own good. And the result? A novelty tune that topped the charts and stuck in people's heads, often to annoyance. The song's origins are a bit quirky too, written by Fred Murray and R.P. Weston. It was a comedic ditty poking fun at King Henry VIII's infamous string of marriages.
She's been married 7 times before, and everyone was in Henry.
Herman's Hermits decided to revive it decades later, leaning into its humor and simplicity. Peter Noon's energetic delivery is full of personality. He almost sounds like he's daring you to not laugh along. The band sped up the tempo and gave it a more modern feel, but they kept the spirit of the original intact. And while it became their second US #1 hit, you've got to wonder how such a deliberately goofy song managed to eclipse some of the more serious and groundbreaking music of the time. So why is it on this list? Well, it is so repetitive. The lyrics are basically the same 2 lines repeated over and over and over and over and over again, with a little chatter from Noon in between. It's a fun novelty, but it does not take long before the charm wears off, and you're thinking, is this it? And hey, I love the British invasion. You know, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, I mean, they were proving that rock and roll could be complex and raw and deeply emotional. And then you had Herman's Hermits, leaning into the cheeky, carefree side of things. And while that did work for a while, I'm Henry VIII, I Am, felt like they were taking the easy way out.
I'm Henry VIII, I am, Henry VIII, I am.
It's fun, but it's not exactly groundbreaking, and that's why it's on this list. I actually really enjoy Herman's Hermits, but I just don't know if Henry VIII is a #1 hit. Surfin Bird by the Trashmen, 1963. Okay, let's talk about Surfin Bird. If you were anywhere near a radio in 1963, you heard this wild, chaotic, borderline absurd song more than a few dozen times.
Everybody's heard about the bird. The bird's a winner, bird.
It was performed by the Trashmen, a surf rock band out of Minneapolis, and it's one of the most unforgettable and polarizing tracks of the decade. Yep, you know the one, the bird is the word, repeated over and over, mixed with manic vocals and a frenetic energy that practically bursts out of the speakers. For some, it was pure fun, but for others, it was an assault on the senses. Either way, Surfin Bird became a cultural oddity that's pretty hard to ignore. The song's creation, unconventional. The Trashmen didn't write Surfin Bird from scratch. It's actually a mashup of 2 songs by the R&B group The Rivingtons. The Trashmen stumbled upon the idea during a live performance, improvising a blend of the 2 songs on stage, and the crowd loved it. And hey, that's an incredible way to find a song, it really is. So they decided to record the version, and before they knew it, Surfin Bird had taken on a life of its own in the sky and on the waves. With its over-the-top vocals, driving beat, and absurd repetition, it climbed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and cemented its place as one of the weirdest hits of the 1960s.
Don't you now, about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is a bird.
But as much as it has become a cult favorite over the years, it's also one of the most divisive songs to ever hit the airwaves. The repetitive lyrics can drive even the most patient listener up the wall. The song's frantic pace and raw energy are undeniably catchy, but they're also just exhausting. It's okay in very small doses, but it's unbearable if you hear it too often, or like even the entire song once. Now, the vocals, they are intentionally wild and grating. Sure, it is a stylistic choice, but if we're being perfectly honest, it's not exactly easy on the ears. So what was happening in 1963? Surf rock was exploding thanks to bands like the Beach Boys and Dick Dale. But while those artists were creating music with depth and nuance, Surfin Bird felt like a novelty act that took things way too far. It was loud, it was messy, and almost deliberately annoying.
About the bird, well, everybody knows that the bird is a bird.
Kinda like the class clown who never knows when to shut up. And while it's fun, it is a fun song, it's also hard to argue it deserves a spot alongside some of the best of that era. And that's why it's on this list. It's more of a joke than a piece of music you'd take seriously, and for better or worse, that's what makes it truly unforgettable. Harper Valley PTA by Jeannie C. Riley, 1968. So this one was everywhere. You could not escape this little country pop crossover from 1968.
And she said, Mama got a note here from the Harper Valley PTA.
Jeannie C. Riley took this sassy story song and turned it into a chart-topping phenomenon, becoming the first woman to top both the Billboard Hot 100 and the country charts simultaneously. Written by Tom T. Hall, the song tells the story of a small-town widow standing up to the judgmental members of the Harper Valley PTA. Sure, the song is clever, it's dramatic, and it's packed with a kind of soap opera flair. But as memorable as it is, it's also one of those tracks that is easy to roll your eyes at.
Well, it happened that the PTA was gonna meet that very afternoon.
The song's story is its biggest hook. Riley's character receives a note from the PTA calling her out for her supposed moral failings, only for her to march straight into their meeting and air their dirty laundry. Lines like, "This is just a little Peyton place, and you're all Harper Valley hypocrites," delivered a 1-2 punch of sass and scandal. And it felt bold in its day. Jeannie C. Riley's twangy, upbeat delivery and eye-catching go-go boots in the music video cemented her as a symbol of rebellion wrapped up in small-town package.
And Mr. Baker, can you tell us why your secretary had to leave this town?
Honestly, it was the perfect recipe for a hit, and it even inspired that TV show and the film. But for all its spice, Harper Valley PTA has not aged too well. For starters, it's hard to ignore just how over the top it is. The lyrics practically shout at you, spelling out the moral of the tale in a way that feels almost cartoonish. Subtlety? Forget about it. It's all about airing grievances with a wink and smirk, which can be fun the first time around, but boy, it feels heavy-handed on repeated listens.
And as she walked up to the blackboard, I can still recall the words she had to say.
And then the sound. The twangy, bouncy production was fresh at the time, but it's not stood the test of time like some other 60s classics. It's catchy, but it wears out its welcome pretty quickly. Harper Valley PTA feels more like a lighthearted soap opera, a bit of Days of Our Lives, more than a song that speaks to the deeper struggles of the time.
If you smell Shirley Thompson's bread, you'll find she's had a little nip of gin.
Its appeal was rooted in small-town drama, which might have felt relatable to some, but didn't have the same resonance as the anthems coming from artists like Aretha Franklin and such. It's not a bad song, I guess, but it's a bit of a novelty, more of a cheeky sing-along than a timeless classic, and that's why it's on this list. It's fun, it's memorable, but it's not quite a masterpiece.
And she said, Mom, I got a note here from the Harper Valley PTA.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips by Tiny Tim, 1968. Talk about songs that left people scratching their heads until you broke the skin. Tiptoe Through the Tulips by Tiny Tim has to be near the top of that list. Released in '68, this quirky, falsetto-filled rendition of a 1929 novelty song became Tiny Tim's signature track and a cultural oddity. You might remember seeing Tiny Tim on TV, clutching his ukulele, crooning this tune in his unmistakable high-pitched voice. Was it weird? Yeah. Was it whimsical? Maybe. And somehow it was wildly popular for a moment. Tiny Tim was a performer who was equal parts musician, comedy, and performance artist, and he brought it back to life in his own unique way. His ukulele strumming and falsetto delivery made it stand out, but not necessarily in a way that everyone loved. It was part nostalgia, part parody, and 100% unforgettable. So why is Tiptoe Through the Tulips on this list of the worst #1 hits from the 1960s? Well, let's start with the obvious. It's just a novelty track through and through. And while some have staying power, this one feels more like a one-time gag. Tiny Tim's falsetto might have been endearing or funny to some, but for many, many others it was downright grating. It's a polarizing performance, and the song itself, with its simplistic melody and repetitive lyrics, doesn't do much to win over the skeptics. It's the kind of tune that's more about the spectacle of Tiny Tim than the music itself.
Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time.
But when Dylan was gracing the same stage that Tiny Tim was and singing about social and political upheaval, well, tipping toes through the tulips just felt like a complete left turn. Sure, it got people talking, but it didn't have the depth or substance that many listeners were craving. It's a song that's remembered more for its oddness than its quality, and while it has charm, it's hard to argue that it deserved the attention it got. And that's why it's here. Not because it's awful or terrible, but because it's a novelty act that became a hit in an era of true classics. Well, there you have them. 12 songs that prove even the 1960s weren't immune to a few musical missteps. Whether it was repetitive lyrics, over-the-top theatrics, or just completely being out of sync with the era. These tracks remind us that not every #1 hit is a masterpiece. But hey, love them or hate them, they've all earned their place in the quirky, colorful history of 1960s music. So, what do you think? Did we include a song you actually enjoy? Or is there a terrible #1 hit that I forgot to mention? Please get down in the comments section below and tell me which songs on this list did you like and which could you not stand. Before you go, please hit that thumbs up icon if you enjoyed the video. It really helps our channel a ton. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that little bell so you don't miss out on our next nostalgic deep dive. But most importantly, from my entire team here at Do You Remember, we want to thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.